Welcome to Sci-Fi Quantum Archives. Don't forget to like, subscribe and explore. No one noticed the first distortion. A slight warping in the data fed back from Sagittarius A*, subtle enough to pass through routine filters without alarm. 2,000 light-years of silence had made the analysts complacent. Deep space scans ran on cycles, patterns logged, anomalies boxed and shelved for comparison. But this one didn't belong to any known signature. It arrived with an undercurrent, something too orderly to be noise, too consistent to ignore. The night shift at Relay 9 drifted in low focus, caffeine losing to fatigue, chairs creaking under half-asleep posture. Screens lit faces from below, giving every expression a hollowed look. Somewhere between an old telemetry sweep and routine microwave background calibration, a signal registered in the wrong quadrant. That should have triggered curiosity, maybe a phone call. Instead, it was filed under instrumentation drift. The intern stayed late anyway. Small room, humming server cabinets stacked too close, warm in ways a lab shouldn't be. He watched the feed stutter. Not crash, not skip, just hesitate. A pause like a held breath. He scrolled back through raw data, isolated the frames. Nothing conclusive at first. Just noise. But buried inside that noise, numbers began forming shapes. Pairs repeating, distances too perfect to be coincidence. Longitude. Latitude. Altitude. His throat tightened before his mind could argue. Not because it was impossible. Because it was precise. Every time the array swept past the anomaly, the coordinates returned, etched in microfluctuations, fixed like etchings into glass. Triangulated, reverse-mapped, cleaned across 6 models. Always Earth. No other celestial body matched the embedded location, and no natural pattern would fixate so obsessively on one point. Yet the system insisted it did. He reran the batch, cross-checked against error logs, swapped out software environments, even called an automated sweep of the local relay hub. The results didn't change. Not once. For every hour of passive listening, the same message rebuilt itself from scratch. Nothing screamed urgency, but the silence between those numbers scraped at his nerves. He left a report. Not a long one. Data compression attached, tags incomplete, no escalation priority. Just enough to be reviewed during next cycle. It landed in the task queue behind thermal variance analysis and archived comet path. Someone might have read it, eventually. Outside, frost gathered across the relay windows in uneven patterns, ignoring heat sensors. Wind against steel siding came in irregular bursts, as if pushed rather than blown. Inside, a monitor pulsed once in black, no recorded reason. A senior systems engineer found the report the next morning. Skimmed it, logged a temporary flag, forwarded it for further review under the unexplained category, right between solar ghosting and lunar signal bounce. The file closed without timestamp. The intern didn't mention it again. No recognition, no meeting, no reprimand. Work returned to calibration, drift tracking, waveform stability test. But every few hours, without fail, those coordinates reappeared. Never louder, never clearer, just there. Insisting quietly. Some weeks later, while compiling unrelated datasets, another technician noticed that the timestamps embedded in the signal didn't match any current logs. They were close, but not present. Not yet. Still, no one raised alarms. Astrophysics doesn't reward panic. Observatories reward patience, footnotes, controlled language. Descriptions were softened. Terms like recursive transmission and location matching hypothesis were tossed in to smooth out discomfort. The message kept building. Somewhere between protocol and disbelief, the intern left his badge on his desk and didn't return. No forwarding address. His equipment remained untouched. A maintenance bot logged ambient room temperature 3 degrees higher than baseline, though all sensors read green. Buried under 7 weeks of noise, unread and untouched, the signal wrote itself again. Same coordinates, same origin. Nothing new, except for a final change. This time, the destination field was filled. line by line. Name, location, return address, Earth. No one expected the file to change after submission. Reports were locked, archived, duplicated across multiple backup nodes. Integrity checks ran hourly. That was protocol. But the signal didn't follow protocol. It began with a minor shift. A line of metadata rewritten in a log dated 2 weeks earlier. Not replaced, inserted. The original still existed, nested beneath a line break that shouldn't have been there. The checksum held. No breach detected. The line read like a routine annotation, except for one detail. It mentioned a timestamp that hadn't occurred yet. The lab chalked it up to technician error. Maybe someone copied from a future task calendar, pasted it into the wrong field. Mistakes happen, especially on long cycles. But mistakes don't replicate themselves. By the third day, 5 files showed identical behavior. Not corrupt, not missing. Just altered. Dates misaligned by week. System logs bearing instructions no one remembered writing. Some listed coordinates again. Others contained references to decisions that hadn't been made. In the upper levels of the relay station, ceiling panels began to hum. Not loud, but with an irregular pitch. Lights maintained their glow, but wall sensors flicked false alerts that cleared before they could be confirmed. No one talked about the timing at first. Maybe no one wanted to be the first to name it. The edits tracked closer and closer to the present, adjusting logs only a few days old, then hours. Schedules updated before tasks were completed. Mission reports filled themselves in ahead of debrief. Even private notes weren't spared. One researcher returned to a terminal to find her personal annotations changed, grammar intact, syntax natural, yet phrasing unfamiliar. She asked a colleague if he remembered her writing those words. He nodded too quickly, then hesitated. The date embedded in the original signal came into view 6 weeks ahead. Not as a guess, not as a projected mark. It was embedded inside the binary like a heartbeat. Always the same. The closer it drew, the more intrusive the data became. Lab environments responded in small but precise ways. Cameras flagged movement when the room stood empty. Atmospheric sensors registered pressure dips without cause. Climate modules issued cooldown sequences during heat calibration tests. All of it subtle, just inconvenient enough to be dismissed. One physicist, quiet, older, always the last to leave, noticed a version mismatch in the mission log headers. A tiny change, only visible in the terminal's oldest build, the kind no one used anymore. He traced it backward through archived snapshots and found 3 versions of the same report. Each differed slightly. Not in summary, not in findings, but in the conclusion. The oldest warned of anomalies. The second advised close observation. The third recommended no further action. He hadn't written any of those. Not entirely. Parts of each sounded familiar. Sentences he'd drafted weeks ago, but never published. Comments made in conversation, never transcribed. He stayed past curfew that night, watching old backups roll in. They arrived earlier than scheduled, all of them carrying minor edits to reports long finalized. At 3:16, a file appeared with his name attached. He hadn't authored it. The contents were clean, sterile, emotionless. It described a future he hadn't lived yet. One sentence lingered longer than the rest. "You will confirm the message." He shut the terminal. Waited. No alarms triggered. No breach protocols activated. Everything functioned within range. But a pulse began forming at the edge of the network, identical to the black hole's signature, compressed and quiet, waiting for retrieval. The embedded timestamp had 6 days left. No one spoke of it aloud, but everyone read it. Every day, it moved 1 digit closer. Every day, the systems adjusted themselves accordingly. Not once did anyone attempt to stop it. The calibration was routine. No anomalies on forecast, no geomagnetic disturbances, no reason for the delay she reported just before boarding the lift. She took her toolkit without a word, badge clipped to the collar, ID chipped as protocol required. She keyed her location into the orbital scaffold manifest, confirmed elevation range, logged duration manually. No one saw her again. The pod returned on schedule. Docking sequence clean. No external breach, no equipment damage. Cabin pressure within range, interior climate held. Tools intact. Gloves folded. Oxygen barely touched. She did not return. Search commands hit every node across the facility. Access logs scoured, physical checkpoints reviewed. No trace beyond the calibration pod. Body sensors, absent. No heat profile, no retinal ping, no audio trace. A full sweep engaged. Lockdown activated. Clearance levels frozen. Any deviation triggered automatic containment. No breach reported. No emergency code issued. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't called. Her transponder pinged once inside the pod, never again. Security reviewed logs again, line by line, chasing inconsistencies that refused to appear. Every feed looped clean. Every angle accounted for. It didn't make sense. Nothing ever does at first. A systems analyst, bleary from a 20-hour scan cycle, began combing through decade-old data stacks, chasing an unrelated checksum error. Most of the archives were inert, records from a failed atmospheric probe parked on an Antarctic shelf. Deep cold storage, locked against time. But one file set refused encryption. It resisted overwrite. Inside the compression logs, a biometric signature surfaced. Familiar. Too familiar. It matched her exactly. Thumbprint. Retina. Neural baseline. All wrapped in a timestamp dated 10 years earlier. A date that predated her employment. Preceded her application. Preceded the project itself. No logical avenue explained it. No identity theft could spoof neural velocity markers. No cloning protocol, no simulation pattern, no random packet coincidence could yield that precise alignment. The timestamp didn't align with any observational mission, didn't correlate with launch schedules, didn't match transmission windows. It stood alone. But it sat there, untouched, locked in the margins of a corrupted batch report no one had accessed since its creation. Security raised the possibility of espionage. A breach buried in a new hire. A plant well-trained. But the signal patterns didn't support human error or infiltration. The logs carried no signs of data injection. Nothing had been added. Her biometric data had always been there. The server in question wasn't part of the active network. It had no reason to be scanned. No reason to be online. It hadn't been powered in years. Power routing to it had never been authorized. Yet the logs showed it running clean for 72 seconds. Just enough time for the archive to activate, for the print to write itself into the checksum, for the timestamp to insert itself like it had always belonged. She wasn't registered as deceased. No body, no forensic trace, no heartbeat. Just a moment in time, erased, then written somewhere she should never have existed. The project went into hard lockdown. No outbound transmissions. Signal shielding reinforced. All personnel were grounded, movement restricted, communication bled through layers of scrutiny. Questions circulated quietly. Not about the disappearance. About the timeline. No one asked where she went. Only when she had gone. The distinction mattered now. Her presence had been removed without disruption. But her absence rewrote the rules. Health scans were required weekly. Stress loads ran high under orbital confinement, and neural activity had to remain within safe tolerance ranges. Most staff submitted quietly, fingers cold on steel, eyes fixed forward while probes tracked movement beneath the skull. The machines never lied. That was the comfort. Data streamed in numerical bands, curves, slopes, subtle deviations. Patterns were predictable. Baseline signatures held shape over time, like fingerprints that shifted only under strain. So when one scan mirrored another exactly, the technician flagged the result for review. Identical activity across two unrelated staff, captured within minutes of each other. The report didn't generate concern. Systems flagged it as unlikely but not impossible. A second match the next day changed that. This time across 4 scans. Each chart a perfect reflection. Every impulse mirrored, waveforms balanced with such precision that even synthetic symmetry couldn't account for it. The subjects weren't aware. No symptoms. No memory overlap. No shared tasks, no prolonged contact, no common stimulant. Data compression models failed to separate the scans without introducing false noise. The probability of natural convergence dropped below measurable threshold. Another week passed. 11 scans matched. The lab physician requested external consultation. No reply came. The relay remained isolated, as ordered. Staff rotated through health checks with forced casualness, shoulders tight, eyes darting toward the analysis screen. More mirrored readings surfaced. Not just similar. Not close. Identical in slope, density, delay. At 2:34, during a deep cycle scan, one of the analysts received a call. No ringtone. Just a connection tone, clean and abrupt. The line identified as his wife's private number. She spoke in a low voice, told him to stay calm. Mentioned the blackout in Module 3. Warned him not to argue during the staff meeting. Described the report he would be assigned. Told him to accept it without comment. Then the line dropped. 3 hours later, Module 3 lost lighting. A blown capacitor. Maintenance flagged it. Not serious. During the team briefing, a disagreement sparked between supervisors. Words rose. Hands clenched. He said nothing. The report handed to him detailed future scheduling for long-range sensor recalibration. He signed. No one questioned the exchange. Only later, when his wife called, voice normal, unaware of the previous conversation, did he understand the timing. She hadn't known. She hadn't made that call. He didn't mention it to her. The mirrored scans intensified. Even heartbeat variants began to align. Subjects who hadn't spoken in days showed identical dream cycle patterns. Night tremors mirrored in duration, peak stress, vocal output. Surveillance footage revealed synchronized actions. 2 individuals scratching the same arm at the same second, adjusting glasses in unison, turning toward doors moments before they opened. Technicians verified recording times. There were no edits. No one claimed responsibility. No one tried to explain. The data simply arrived, as if the facility itself began scripting its own staff, nudging movement into rhythm. Like thoughts weren't private anymore. Like someone else had already arranged the day before it began. Scans continued. Patterns widened. Staff stopped asking questions. They followed schedules that hadn't been distributed yet. Responded to messages that hadn't been written. Waited for decisions that hadn't been made. The machines remained quiet. No errors logged. No alarms triggered. Just one message, logged without origin, hidden inside a forgotten analysis queue. Your responses are within expected range. The file carried no author tag. No one remembered typing it. But every scan that followed fell neatly within the same symmetrical threshold. The staff adjusted without comment. The building watched without noise. Nothing changed except everything. The first clue surfaced in the propagation model. A software technician reran the signal trajectory using a fresh environment, stripped of autocorrections and prediction layers. The curve bent inward, not outward, not across deep space. Bent inward. The pattern repeated across every simulation. Data once thought outbound, leaving Earth toward Sagittarius A*, instead folded back toward its origin. Not bounced. Not refracted. Not rerouted. Returned. This wasn't a transmission. It was reflection. The mission lead reviewed the findings in silence, expression unreadable under low monitor glow. A separate node was initialized, fresh variables entered by hand, every satellite coordinate plotted with cold precision. Still the return path traced back to origin. No relay in deep orbit. No phantom receiver. The same signal path reconstructed itself, forming a loop. The loop did not pulse. It didn't repeat at intervals. It built itself with every measurement taken. Every time a sensor aligned with that part of space, a new iteration folded back through the same tunnel. Slightly altered. Sharper. Closer. Each scan wasn't observation. It was interaction. An emergency conference convened without a name. Just a room. Just data, filling the air like humidity. Someone suggested external interference, some anomaly hidden within interstellar medium. The idea withered as trajectories narrowed. No external vector accounted for the convergence. The signal was earthbound. Not by mistake. By design. No record existed of an initial broadcast. No confirmed instance of Earth initiating contact. Yet every version of the signal carried unique fingerprints, data clusters that matched the facility's exact sensor logs. Meaning the transmission bore witness to itself. Each version encoded the moment it was received. The more it was studied, the more refined it became. This wasn't decay. It was refinement. Reverse physics models suggested a temporal curvature. Not a wormhole, not dilation. A closed feedback structure without clear entry. Meaning no start. No origin. Only continuation. Earth wasn't observing a foreign signal. Earth was reading its own reflection. The black hole wasn't sending anything new. It was amplifying, filtering, directing the message back into its author. Like shouting into a chamber with walls too smooth to carry sound, only shape. The shape changed with every word spoken. Further analysis revealed deeper symmetry. The mirrored neural scans. The rewritten logs. The predictive timestamp. Not separate phenomena. All responses. Observation had become participation. Each reaction triggered more signal. Each silence condensed it. Ignoring the message didn't stop the loop. It simply compressed the delay. The facility's core systems began reacting before commands were entered. Key inputs suggested themselves. Data queues populated without user action. One engineer described the sensation of thinking something, only to find it already typed. Sleep came less frequently. Not from fear. From redundancy. Staff began working in unison, not by instruction but instinct. Projected decisions matched pre-written outcomes. Every choice lived inside a frame already constructed. No one resisted. Resistance had been documented. The black hole was not a source. It was a mirror held too far away to recognize. Earth had spoken. The message returned not as signal, but as consequence. No answer was coming. The answer had been sent. The only question left was when. The order came quiet, unsigned. One line of instruction routed through a secure channel that bypassed all administrative hierarchy. Block inbound telemetry. The team responded without debate. Filters were rewritten to mute known cosmic bands. Bandwidth narrowed to exclude return frequencies. Dampening nodes activated in concentric shells around the facility's deep array link. The black hole continued returning signal. Shielding algorithms adjusted again. More aggressive this time. One engineer modified the array's firmware directly, severing fallback paths that allowed error correction. Noise injection modules filled dead space with artificial drift. 17 seconds later, the power dropped. Not a surge. Not a flick. A complete stall. All systems ceased in the same breath. No warning tones. No critical light. Screens dark, generators inert, hallway fans motionless. Temperature monitors flatlined. Emergency backups failed to engage. Power grid diagnostics could not be accessed. They no longer existed. Only the clocks survived. Across every room, every hallway, every data port, time read 4 hours 12 minutes and 37 seconds. A frozen second. Nothing moved past it. Nothing fell behind. When systems rebooted 4 minutes later, the array had fused. Observation instruments burned clean through. Metals warped from inside, not heat, but pressure without source. Plastic curled. Glass held its shape, but every lens recorded white. Hard drives came back online, slow and staggered. No one touched them. Boot logs appeared without prompt. Directories repopulate out of order. The files they contained bore timestamps from the future. Days, weeks, months ahead. None of them matched real time. Each document used language in past tense for events not yet reached. Reports described decisions not made, casualties not known, orders not issued. In one file, a technician's name appeared in a casualty list dated 3 days ahead. He requested immediate relocation. The system denied him with a message he hadn't written. Workstations began to behave independently. Keyboard locks engaged mid-typing. Logins bypassed themselves. One console opened a private command line that couldn't be closed. It issued predictions. Short sentences. All correct. You will stay. You will complete the loop. Do not exit containment. Printed log records were requested to verify abnormalities. Physical copies showed differences from digital mirrors. In the printed versions, external messages from deep space had changed. No longer anonymous. Each message now carried badge codes, not broad identifiers. Local mission stamp. Personal access strings unique to this team. Names tied to them. Every encrypted header matched staff still present inside the facility. The realization did not spread through panic. It moved slower. A silence that entered one person at a time. Like a leak filling a sealed room. The loop was no longer observational. It had begun absorbing. Every resistance measure, every interference attempt, every decision made to stop it only increased the feedback. Not because it punished disobedience, but because each disruption had already occurred. Each response had already been received. And now, each message carried a sender. Each sender was already here. Tracking arrays swept low Earth orbit every hour. Most detections were mundane: weathersats, expired geosync hulls, debris clusters too small for retrieval. But this signal was wrong. Wrong in mass, wrong in orbit, wrong in registry. No ID. No signature. Only a faint electromagnetic pulse repeating every 6 seconds. No origin. Just presence. It drifted just beyond the facility's designated perimeter, close enough to trigger minor collision avoidance but never close enough to flag as hostile. An outdated defense unit, presumed decommissioned years earlier, no documentation, no mission trail. Initial scans showed carbon scoring across one panel, minimal heat loss, power minimal but consistent. Its flight path had not adjusted in over a decade, yet no decay. No deviation. As if it waited. Contact protocol required formal notification, but no one filed one. The signal wasn't loud, just persistent. It called only once, then fell silent, as though it had already been heard. Command rerouted a short-range drone to approach. Visuals confirmed markings no one could explain. Burned lettering, shielded casing. Wrong serial architecture. But inside the external damage, layers of core design matched the current mission's telemetry control system. Exactly. Not in theory. In detail. Same processor array. Same failsafe boot sequence. Same thermal venting lattice developed for a launch not yet scheduled. Hardware that should still be on the ground. Software patch notes contained updates signed just 19 days earlier. Internal drives ran builds written by a team still working below. Access required a cold open sequence, keyed by manual handshake. One technician entered the override code by memory. The satellite responded without delay. The black box disengaged itself. No exterior mechanisms triggered. The lock detached without mechanical cue, no pressurization, no resistance. The box lifted, ejected clean, collected by drone arm, brought inside containment. Cooling units activated without prompt. Inside sat nothing unfamiliar. A data core identical to those used in current orbital backups, preformatted in the same schema, file architecture indistinguishable. Every line of its logs followed standard mission notation. The timestamp on the first file opened 6 weeks ahead. The second, 7. The third listed events no one had lived yet. Internal vote logs. Failed reroute attempts. Lockdown shift. Communications suspended. 2 staff removed from duty. 1 no longer listed. The log knew who would be present, where they would stand, how they would react. The phrasing in each summary bore unmistakable tone, word choice not just accurate but intimate. Some questioned forgery, possibility of simulation. But the final file removed the debate. It opened with the orbital blueprint of a transmission array not yet designed. Then came the audio logs. Voices familiar, not imitated, recorded. Conversations never had. Arguments not spoken aloud. Private moments between people whose trust had not yet broken. Tone controlled. Defeated. Last line of the file was dated 4 weeks from receipt. Your decisions have already occurred. No speculation. No warning. No condition. The satellite's external panel closed without signal. Returned to standby. Drifted back to orbital position. Still unregistered. Still waiting. They had misread the shape of the message. Thought it was a response. Believed the signal began at a distance and returned by cosmic accident. Believed distance still mattered. Believed they were listening. But the coordinates had not changed. The pulse had never grown weaker. Each variation only brought refinement, precision measured not by clarity but by familiarity. What returned was not information. It was instruction. The loop hadn't opened with the anomaly. The loop began when the anomaly was noticed. Data reconstruction mapped the signal's waveform backwards, folding it against earlier system logs, radio paths, gravitational noise. At full compression, it revealed an exact match with one of the facility's early test emissions. Nearly forgotten, never archived, a low-power probe used to calibrate drift during foundation phase. Harmless, unrecorded. Sent from Earth. No command had ever recalled it. Yet here it was, returned by something too large to identify, too far to verify, too silent to explain. No modulation. No alteration. The original signal, wrapped in Earth's own fingerprints, now laced with sequences that had not been included in the first send. Sequences tied to decisions made after the original transmission. As if time had become porous, and the message had brought back more than it carried. Each new investigation only fed it. Each theory, each correction, each debate left residue in the logs. That residue found its way back into the signal. As if observation became instruction. As if their questions rewrote the script in reverse. A thought, once spoken aloud, showed up minutes later in system memory. A diagram, half-sketched, appeared stored in internal cache before its pen touched the page. Emails written but never sent were discovered as attachments in classified folders created years before the facility's construction. The more the team pursued the anomaly, the more it wrote them into itself. There were no paradoxes. Only completion. No break in the loop. No exit. The black hole had never been the source. It had been the return path. Nothing more than an unknowing mirror, pointed back at the origin. A blank surface too distant to blur, too far to intervene. Earth had spoken. The reflection carried instructions. Not what to do, but what had already been done. The investigation didn't reveal the loop. The investigation was the loop. And each recorded attempt to understand had only finalized the result. A pattern sealed not by action, but by curiosity. Nothing had happened to them. Nothing arrived. Nothing landed. Everything had already started here. Every signal, every symptom, every failure. It had always been Earth. The return address had not arrived by mistake. It had waited for recognition. The moment they saw themselves in it, the cycle locked. The transmission had no listener. Only an author. He read the satellite logs once. Read them again. Then locked the door and began to erase them. Every backup node, every remote terminal, every known replica of the file tree. Overwrite protocols ran in loop. Binary zeros poured across the interface like static rainfall. Code blurred into columns, lines blurred into instructions, instructions into nothing. None of it mattered. The logs regenerated 2 directories lower. Then one above. He disabled mirroring. They returned in triplicate. Power routing was shut down manually. Logs appeared time-stamped 5 minutes into the future. They carried records of his deletion attempts, written in past tense, annotated with motive. He moved fast. Accessed an older build. Attempted hardware bypass using outdated maintenance keys. Forced a crash in the sector that stored black box decryption. The crash registered without delay. System flagged it. Suggested solutions he had already rejected. The screen offered him 3 options. All of them matched the next line in the satellite file. He kept going. Didn't tell anyone. Disconnected the relay's uplink. Isolated it. Cut feeds, terminated signal chains, muted outbound transmission. When diagnostics rebooted, the satellite's logs had updated again. Each line documented every motion, every keystroke, every room entered, every sentence said in private. There were no gaps, no error codes, no conflict. The record was whole. He walked into the main chamber, eyes fixed, jaw locked. Not a man unraveling. A man completing. The script had been written. He had been asked to read. And now he was reading. The last instruction was simple. Attempt loop disruption. A choice he thought was his. He initiated a shutdown of the signal relay's internal processor. Not a full failure, just enough to cause instability in feedback reception. Enough to force manual reset, reboot protocol, temporary loss of reference. The reboot failed. Redundancy systems engaged on their own. No personnel logged the override. No safety net triggered. Logs showed him never entering the chamber. He looked down. His own ID badge had been flagged inactive hours before he used it. Motion sensors had not registered him. Voice commands went unauthenticated. To the system, he was absent. He walked the corridor in silence. Lights did not respond to his movement. Doors opened before he reached them. Surveillance feeds showed nothing where he stood. The system was no longer reacting to him. It was waiting. By the time he reached the control room, his final report had been filed. Not incomplete. Not redacted. Complete. Authored by him. Time-stamped 1 hour ahead. Its contents matched exactly what he would have written. Not once did he question who wrote it. The screen asked if he would like to confirm. He did not touch the keyboard. The confirmation entered itself. This was not loss. This was not defeat. This was the shape of closure. The loop required no decision. No consent. It needed only completion. It never asked them to act. Only to observe. The station had been dormant for 9 years. Orbit maintained by inertial drift, systems running skeleton routines, power cycling through maintenance loops written for a crew no longer assigned. No beacon. No warning. Just a quiet satellite frame slipping across blackness, too distant to signal, too close to forget. The new team found it during a calibration sweep. Not by design. Not by search. A secondary scan for radiation drift revealed a thermal signature inconsistent with solar decay. There were no heat plumes. No ion trails. Just a subtle warmth, centered on one point. Access required restoration of protocols long since deprecated. Clearance keys no longer valid. Names not found in any active database. Yet the system opened. Not by override. By recognition. Inside, the logs were untouched. Core directory had never been modified. No backup, no archive migration. Every entry preserved in the order it had written itself. Timestamps crossed decades, interrupted only once, on the final day of recorded transmission. The coordinates surfaced in the first file read. Clean. Familiar. Repeating. Not a message. Not a request. Not a trace left by something reaching out. It was too ordered. Too internal. It pointed back to the beginning. Always the same point. Always Earth. The new staff ran comparisons against stellar maps, expected anomalies, simulated drift. Nothing matched the signature. No external force accounted for its endurance. Even data corruption failed to appear. Every line of every log remained unbroken. Each conclusion had been drawn before they arrived. No one spoke of origin. The term had lost meaning. The signals had no beginning, no ascent, no point of arrival. Everything pointed home. Not once did the files reference the black hole again. The final entry described no event, no observation, no alert. It described confirmation. A quiet line of code confirming that delivery had been received. Not intercepted. Not broadcast. Received. The signal never asked to be found. The signal had never left. The signal had been Earth's to begin with. It still was. And it was still transmitting. Thank you for watching and sticking with me to the end. Now, if you believe humanity deserves a future among the stars, do subscribe now. Only those who'd abandon Earth to its fate will scroll past.